on YouTube. At least that's what it says on my end.
Yeah, me too.
I think that means we're live, Roddy. I think that means you can kick this bad boy off.
Well, you should wait for a cue from our producer.
You're good. Go. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1.
Kind of while waiting on it. What do we get? Nothing. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the UGA Sports Live podcast. My name is Roddy DeBolsey. I'm joined by Dane Young, the producer of the show, Jake Roos, and Trent Smallwood, the recruiting gurus, the recruiting whiz kids at UGAsports.com, who tell you names that you may not know. And then all of a sudden, those guys are UGA football players. So shout out to Trent and Jake for keeping us all informed. They do a great job. Don't tell them I said that. And they'll ask for raises, and I don't want to give them one. Big shout out to our sponsors, Classic City Eats on Baxter, which is where we'd all love to be right now, but we can't. Hopefully in the coming days, they will be up and running. They have done a ton of new work at Classic City Eats. They took down all the dollar bills that they had up, and they used them to pay their staff. They try to keep their staff doing well. So they've done some painting over there. They've done some remodeling. So when you get back to Classic City Eats, it will be a beautiful place. Of course, our shout out to our friends at Athens Ford, who are doing great financing deals during these tough financial times. So check them out. Our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors. And speaking of, that guy's doing a wonderful job trying to help other businesses. So shout out to Ryan Lucia. Of course, Your Pie, all the 70 plus locations of Your Pies, and Academia Brewing Company, who was feeding people for free on Sunday, people who are in the industry. So shout out to them. Anyway, guys, we have a lot of questions that came in. I know everybody wants to know when's football going to start. We had a scoop on that this past Friday. We found out very sneakily about a conference call that was held between the Georgia medical staff, the trainers, the coaches, and support staff. So we'll talk about that on the show. Lots going on in recruiting. Recruiting's never stopped. That's why, when we switched this format, I'm like, let's get Jake and Trent on as much as possible, because that has not changed at all. So Jake, go ahead and start some questions while I share the podcast with folks on Twitter and Facebook. And please, everyone, if you would, if you're watching this on YouTube, share it. We'd greatly appreciate it. As we link it to Facebook, if you would share it there, we'd also appreciate it. It would mean the world to us.
All right, yeah. If you didn't get over to UGA Sports last week and check out the recruiting war room, I do encourage you to do so, because we touched on a lot of stuff in terms of guys you need to know, names to pick up on, et cetera, et cetera. But despite all this going on with Georgia recruiting, it seems like what people want to talk about most, and what I'm getting the most questions about, is Tennessee. And
them cheating bastards.
Rightfully so. I think what the Vols are doing is kind of setting the precedent for what people are expecting out of recruiting in this shutdown time. It's been almost a daily thing. Multiple guys some days. Pruitt really loading up the class early on. I really need to go check the number. I looked at the commit list earlier, but I don't even know how many kids they've got already. So let's start off, I guess, with that.
18.
18. God almighty. Damn. They're gonna be done. I mean, what are those? VolQuest is gonna be done by September. They're not gonna have anything to report on.
Hey, that works out really well, though, because Brent Hubbs actually is quite the farmer. I don't know if y'all knew that. So by the time the fall harvest comes in, he'll be done. He'll be pretty clear. He can have all the – and, hey, I tease our folks at VolQuest, but that is a fantastic site. If you are anybody in your family or friends or anything like that is a Tennessee fan, VolQuest, as much as we give them hell, that is one fantastic journalistic outfit. So if they're reporting it, it's true. Let's give credit where credit is due. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to give a shout out to Rob and Brent Hubbs and all those guys up there.
Well, and I think that part of what has got people talking about this so much, you got 18 guys committed to Tennessee. Georgia has 7 commits. So it's now, I reminded people in the recruiting snapshot that we did with Chad Simmons, this is pretty similar territory to what you saw from Georgia last year. The numbers were low going into the summer, but the quality of the commits is pretty high. Georgia's got the highest star rating, tied with Clemson with 4 stars. So impressive numbers there already. Trent, I guess, what are your thoughts on what we've seen from Tennessee so far? Does it make sense? Is it a good ploy? Is it setting the standard for the SEC? Is it putting any heat on Kirby Smart?
I don't think so. I think Georgia's at a stage now where they're in the picky stage. I mean, they're trying to handpick their guys. And, I mean, there's a couple guys on Tennessee's commitment list that Georgia just backed away from that didn't show as much attention, like that Kamar Wilcoxon, that was committed to Florida. Georgia didn't go, hard after him when he decommitted from Florida, and Pruitt stepped in and won him over. But Tennessee's in a well, they just need they need players, they need bodies, and Georgia's in a stage where they're a little bit more picky. They're in they're wanting them high 4-5-star prospects, and they're in a where they can play the waiting game a little better than Tennessee can. Tennessee can't play that waiting game till the end. They need those bodies in there for that depth. So it's a little different situation, but Pruitt is putting together a good class. I think the impressive thing is they have 5 kids from the state of Alabama on their commitment list.
Yeah.
Only 2 from the state of Georgia, and only 2 from Tennessee, from their home state. But they got 4 from Florida and 5 from Alabama. So he seems to be going after Alabama pretty hard.
Well, and it seems like kind of a tough year, I think, for Tennessee. I've just not a lot of names that jump off the board to me when I'm thinking about players up in Tennessee this year.
You got the big offensive lineman that was
Josie.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 every year that, are going to stand out to you. Obviously, Tennessee kind of has its ups and downs when it comes to in-state talent. But, you mentioned guys on this list. If I'm looking at it right now, I think Cody Brown is a guy Georgia talked to. I think if Georgia had pursued harder, they probably could have won out there. I think that they've moved on to other targets. Donovan Edwards in particular, as well as LJ Johnson, who we had a story up with yesterday. Look for those guys to kind of be the main 2 guys. But Cody's a guy Georgia entertained. Terrence Lewis is a guy that is a good player, a really good player. I think that he would, kind of fit in anywhere. I think Georgia probably should have probably recruited him a little bit harder. I don't think that they recruited him as much as they should have. And he's a great inside guy. Julian Nixon has had an offer forever, but Georgia just kind of never materialized. Kamar Wilcoxon, as you mentioned, and then the main guy that I think is the crown jewel of Tennessee's class is Dylan Brooks. Just a real lengthy kid. Alabama was involved on that one. Tough that you can pull a kid like that from Alabama. So, I get where they're coming from, and I do think it's buying them a lot of free press right now, and that's a good thing. It's buying Tennessee all kinds of media hype. Everybody's talking about him. Barrett Salee even went as far as to say within the next 3 years, I think Tennessee's going to win the SEC East. So I understand what it's doing for them. I'll be surprised if all of these kids are on the commit list at the very end. Quite frankly,
let me ask you something. If Georgia was sitting here today with 18 commits and 12 3-stars, what would our what would the Georgia fan base be like?
They would be beside themselves.
They'd lose their damn minds.
Yeah, they'd be beside themselves.
I mean, Kirby hasn't had 12 3-stars since he arrived in Athens. So,
yeah.
I mean,
no, not at all. Not at all.
But in the absence of results, I think when you have any kind of positive momentum, really the perception is the reality on that. And so we're all looking for content of some kind to either consume or in our case to put out. And I think that's what Tennessee has somehow taken advantage of is when you get so many recruits in such a short period of time in the absence of results. I mean, at the same time, Alabama's down there, under Western Michigan on the Rivals team rankings right now. Obviously that's not going to stick, right? So, but they have a history that they're going to be better than that. Tennessee doesn't in recent years. So getting that little spark in the recruiting period, maybe it's meaningful for them for where their program is.
Well, and I think too that you've got to give a lot of credit to Jeromy Pruitt as an evaluator. There's really no denying that, in my opinion. He is a guy who has a great eye for talent, one of the best in college football, in my opinion. Dante Jackson, who was a huge star for LSU. He spotted that kid when he had no SEC offers, had a Tulane on. He was a Tulane commit at the time. DeAndre Baker's another kid that he scouted heavily. I mean, he's a guy who, Amon Richards was another
Jonathan
guy.
Abram.
Jonathan Abram. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's got a track record when it comes to talent evaluation. And I respect what Pruitt's doing.
I had a little hesitation there simply because he's also surrounded himself with guys who are great talent evaluators too.
Yeah.
And, if Tennessee is on the way back, I want to give Pruitt credit for also finding great coaches. So
Sure.
He's been able to bring guys with him who know what they're doing. So when people go, and I do the same thing with Kirby Smart. When people say, Kirby, I'm like, don't forget, he also has Dell McGee. Now, granted, he's the one that hired Dell McGee. He hires Matt Luke. He hires Sam Pittman. He hires Dan Lanning. So I give him credit for that. So ultimately, the head guy gets all the credit and all the blame. But with Jeromy Pruitt, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, Jeremy's good, but man, he has hired some strong coaches. So if they're coming back, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
No. I think that's on point. Now, I will say this. Chad Simmons and I talked about this the other day, and I do think that there is some merit to this discussion. And this is not just a Tennessee thing. This is pretty much everybody who's had these ridiculous runs of recruiting in the shutdown. Is Chad said, to be honest with you, man, I'm surprised. He said, I'm surprised of how many of these commits that we've seen. I feel the same way. And what I said back was, I'm really interested to see how many of these stick once things reopen and kids get back on the visit trail and all of a sudden get a chance to, get wined and dined again, get the chance to come to the campus and get the coaches stroking egos again. How much of this will we see stick? I think from Georgia's perspective, they're in a good situation because you've got a small number of guys to continue to focus on your commit list. And then you're just waiting, I think, essentially for the end of this to come to really ramp the efforts back up. Now, that's not to say that they're not recruiting hard right now, but I do think that they're being a little bit more calculated than some of the other teams out there. And I think that it'll end up paying off for them in the end because they've accepted commits from guys right now that if I'm looking at that list, I don't see a ton of guys that just jump out to me as like possible decommits.
So you kind of hit on it there. How many of those guys did Georgia legitimately want? And I'm not trying to say, oh, well, I don't want to do sour grapes. It's one of my number one pet peeves about recruiting is when a kid goes, you want a kid, you want a kid, you want a kid. He picks someone else. You go, oh, we didn't want him anyway. And what really chaps my ass is when coaching staffs tell writers, oh, we didn't recruit him that hard, or we let him go. And we know it's BS because a week prior to that, they're like, hey, what's the latest you're hearing about this kid? What are you hearing about him? They're trying to hit us up for information as if we, spoke to him, which we don't. And they're obviously going after him. We talked to the kid. There's like, yeah, these coaches are calling me every day, or they're texting me every day. And then he picks a different school. And it's like the coaches put out they don't want to be seen as missing on a kid. And I remember years ago, a different recruiting service, there was a writer out there who would go into the school he covered and remove offers from that school to these kids when they went somewhere else. It's like, and I'm not going to call them out, but let's just say it was Ohio State or Clemson or Florida or Georgia. They'd go into the database and say when the kid went to Texas, they'd remove the Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida offer, as if, oh, they didn't even offer him. I'm like, look, you're not a PR guy for the coach you cover. That's BS. So it bugs me when they do that. So I'm not saying this from any sort of sour grapes mentality, but when I look at the fact that I think you nailed it. If Georgia had 18 commits and 12 of them are 3 stars, people would be complaining. They'd be making comparisons to Mark Richt, who I don't think took that many 3 stars, in one season. Maybe he did. I don't know, but that seems kind of awfully high 3 stars for even one of Mark Richt's squads. So if you're looking at the end of the season, end of the year, and they've got 25 commits, say, and 67% of them are 3 stars, I don't know that people would be happy with that. But so when you looked at that list, you nailed some names. How many of those legitimately have been able to commit to Georgia in your mind?
I would say
5,
if I'm looking
4?
at it, maybe At one point, probably 5 at one point. 2 weeks ago, I would say 3, 2, maybe. Yeah.
I think Terrence
me?
Lewis. I think Terrence
Okay.
Lewis and Dylan Brooks are two names that Georgia probably would, if it was today and Georgia had a chance to take them. I think those are 2 names, but other than that, I don't know. I don't see many names.
Will Coxon's on the line for me. I think that he's a kid who probably had a spot at Georgia at one point. I don't know that that's the case any longer. I mean, I said in the War Room the other day, free plug for the War Room again, that you should get out, you should go by and check it out, because Will Coxon's a kid that honestly surprised me a little, because I thought he was leaning Georgia when he came off of that last Florida decommitment. And I say last because he is on his 3rd commitment right now. But, this is a situation where, I mean, if you look at the recruiting rankings and what it's doing for Tennessee, like I said, it's free buzz. They're sitting number 2 in the nation, right behind Ohio State. It's a very interesting move. I don't know how it'll pay off, and we won't know for some time. And I think it's going to create a lot of hand wringing potentially, because they're going to have maybe some kids down the line, especially if they have a good season, who start sniffing around. And then what are you going to do? You got 18 kids. You're going to have to start kissing some guys goodbye, potentially, and that's never a good look.
But
so it's tough.
You look at the recruiting rankings. You got who's at number 3, North Carolina, with a similar looking class, with a higher star average. So, recruiting rankings are good, but when you're looking at it in May, they kind of get it's who has the most commits is basically what you're looking at in May. And I mean, the star average for Tennessee right now is 3.33, and so I don't think Kirby's had below a 4 or a 3.9 since he's been in Athens. So
well, and Trent, if you look over at the UNC class, I mean, I think it's similar to what you see in the Tennessee class, in that there's probably, I don't know, 4 kids on there maybe that I think at one point could have probably committed to Georgia. Jared Wilson obviously was committed to Georgia at one point. Ranieria Dilworth is another guy that I think had a spot at one time. DeAndre Boykins, possibly. I think they would have sniffed around there a little bit harder if they felt there was some interest. And then Kobe Paceauer had an offer. Keyshawn Silver's probably the other guy that I think. So you got 3 or 4 guys in that class too. It's the thing about it is they're not loading up with guys that Georgia necessarily was all over. Now you go over to Ohio State, and it's a whole different ball game with that number 1 class. But again, I think it's a situation where you've just got to kind of feel it out. I think that we're going to see how this ends up really playing out. I think once the shutdown is over and kids are able to get back on the trail, because suddenly you got new kids visiting, suddenly you got your commits visiting elsewhere. It's going to be tough, I think, to keep that class together.
One thing to remember with Tennessee, though, is that Jeromy Pruitt has done a really good job in the transfer market to just increase the amount of talent they have and the amount of experience that they have. If you look at Tennessee's offensive line, especially if Cade Mays is eligible to play, it's going to be one of the best, I would say, either 2 or 3 offensive lines in the SEC. That's something you couldn't say for Tennessee in a long time.
No question about it. No question about that.
That's definitely in the top.
I think they just need quarterback play. They just had inconsistent quarterback play, and is Harrison Bailey going to be that guy for them to provide that consistent quarterback play? That's we'll see, but I think they need consistent quarterback play for Jim Chaney.
Well, what do we make out of this? What do we make of this prediction from Barrett Saliba? Tennessee 3 years winning the SEC East.
So I think they're going to have to recruit better. I mean, to get down to it, and I mean, this is the same thing they said with Dan Mullen at Florida. that Dan Mullen was going to come in and take over the East. He hasn't recruited well enough to hang with Georgia. And I don't think Tennessee is at that point yet. I think they could get to that point. I think Jeromy Pruitt is the kind of recruiter that can get to that point where he's recruiting with Kirby Smart, but he's not there yet. And I think you have to bring in the players like that to compete without.
So 3 years, Pruitt's winning the SEC East.
That was the prediction.
All right, Barrett. So I guess he knows that Kirby Smart's having an aneurysm at some point. I bust him, but I tease Barrett. He's a great guy, and he spots trends. Now, sometimes he's wrong, just like we all are, but he is much more of a opinion guy. He gives hot takes, which he's able to go back a lot of them and go, "Hey, I called this, 4 years ago." So I give Barrett a lot more credit than just the Twitter hot take artists who just spout enough crap that eventually something sticks, and they somehow ignore all the ones they got wrong, but will crow about the ones they got right. And when Barrett's wrong, he goes out there and he takes it on the chin and says, "Look, I was wrong." I get his thing, but it's tough because Florida could be getting better under Dan Mullen. There's a strong argument there that they have. I mean, hell, they couldn't have gotten worse. Or same with Tennessee. I mean, when Georgia's beating them, goes in and beats them, 88-0 or 88-7 in back-to-back games or something. Just a couple years ago, it was just abysmal if you're a Tennessee or a Florida fan. So they've had coaching changes of getting better, recruiting stronger. But if you go back, and why did Mark Richt get fired? Because he could get a top 10 class. That's not good enough. When Auburn and Alabama and LSU and other schools were having a top 5 class. So you come in with your top 10 class. Top 10 sounds fantastic, but it's not enough to win you the SEC. He'd won the East a few times. Didn't matter. Couldn't win the whole thing. So even if Tennessee is good and they recruit better, you're not recruiting at the level of Kirby Smart. You're not like Trent mentioned earlier, picking and choosing. Who you want. You're telling Cody Brown, we like you, we really do, but we're waiting on Donovan Edwards, and let's see what happens. And Cody's like, no, I'm going to go ahead with the one that needs me more. When I see a class like this, they do need to address depth issues, like Dane said. You got to build up that depth, and sometimes that takes a lot of 3. In other words, you look at what Kirby Smart came to UGA with that first year, and he's like, man, we need offensive linemen bad. We need defensive linemen badly. And he took some guys that I don't think he would take this year, that's not to say they were bad players, but they took some that he's like, look, just to get bodies on the field, just to be able to run practice. So, Jeromy Pruitt's in that rebuilding mode, but I think Dane nailed it when he said, look, all that's coming in one sitting. So they look red hot because nothing else is going on. Commitment. It has this momentum. It builds up. But let's go back to you and me, Jake, sitting at Classics at Eats on Baxter. Georgia has 3 commits. They're still trying to get Justin Fields that entire class. And we're like, it's March. They've got nobody. What's going on? May, they had like 5 commits. We're like, what the hell is going on? Kirby's behind the 8 ball, pulls off the number 1 class. The following year, same thing. We're like, whoa, wow, he pulled off the number 1 class. All these other kids are scared to commit. And we go into June with Georgia not having anybody. Then they've gone that run in June, July. I remember I was overseas, and every time I'm waking up at 2 a.m. because you guys are like, hey, Georgia's got another 5-star commit. I'm like, oh, I was out of town, and Georgia picked up 11 commits and number 1 class. Last year, slow start, number 1 class. If you fire off all those commits in one time frame, it looks magnificent. But if you get the 4 and 5 stars slowly over the year, it's not as exciting. Georgia gets those kids early sometimes get them late. But if you do them because they're so spread out, you remember when this whole shutdown thing happened, other teams were getting commits, Georgia wasn't. Then they get Jefferson, then they get Micah. It's like, okay, now they're getting somewhere, but it's that because they're picking and choosing, and I'm not saying they're deliberately spreading them out, but that's just the way some of these kids make up their minds, not all being concentrated, like Dane said. it won't get the same amount of coverage. If Georgia got all those 4 and 5 stars at one setting, you know, at 1 2-week period, everybody would be like, holy crap, what's Georgia doing? There'd be national stories about it. And you would see those same hot takes. Georgia's going to win the national title. Look how where they're recruiting. We overreact and we underreport on a ton of different things. I think this is an overreaction. Again, not taking anything away from what Jeromy Pruitt's doing. I know all the Tennessee fans are clipping this section out going, here's Roddy throwing Tennessee under the bus. No, I think it's great. I'm just thinking that because celebrating getting 6 or guys all at once, as Trent said, when you look at what's it going to look like on December 23rd, or if they still have that early signing day, what's that going to look like? It looks like a class right now, mostly made up of maybe their star ranking gets up to 3.5, but you're not going to be able to beat Kirby Smart with an average star rating of 3.5 when his is over 4.
Well, and it's a unique approach, like we said, of gaining that momentum, but simultaneously, like I said, you got to worry then about the holding on and the ability to evaluate other guys, and maybe you got to move on from a guy or something of that nature. Whereas it seems to me that Kirby over time has really focused on the close, and the closer to signing, the closer to this whole process being wrapped up. I think in order to ensure that the guys that he thinks are going to be part of the class are part of the class, rather than having to fight for 18 kids for the next, till February. So
that's good.
Yeah, I think that it's not necessarily less stressful, because I'm sure that, because I know that they're out there recruiting hard and heavily right now, but it may be a bit more. I think it's a bit more calculated, and like I said, I think that they live for the finish. They close as well as anybody. The last 2 classes, I think it was, they've become the number 1 class on signing day. So I think it's long game versus short term, and I appreciate though what Jeremy's doing. I think Dane, you said it right. I mean, you've won the media battle right now, and you've got every kid on Twitter talking about Tennessee, and that's something that it's been a while.
The other thing though about the SEC East, to say that Tennessee in the next 3 years could win the SEC East is saying that Tennessee is going to be set up to compete with Georgia at that level. And I don't think anyone that follows recruiting or on-field results would claim that based on what we've seen. We just haven't seen that. I mean, it's apples and oranges right now. I look at it more from like a boxing scenario where Georgia's the heavyweight champ of the East. And before Tennessee gets in contention with Georgia, they've got to be in contention with Florida. Now, this is where
South Carolina
and Kentucky, really. I mean, Kentucky's been a really good team for the past 3 years now. I mean, Stoops has done a great job there.
You're gonna piss some people off and Knoxville with that.
No, but I actually think that the number 1 contender against Georgia from this point forward is Tennessee. And I say that because when Nick Saban had to replace Kirby Smart on his staff, it wasn't even a thought. He went to Jeromy Pruitt immediately and said, "Come back home, Jeromy. We're ready for you." And they just kept on moving along. Jeromy Pruitt knows exactly what Kirby Smart did to build up Georgia. I just think Tennessee was kind of behind the 8 ball way more than Georgia was. Tennessee's coming, and I think that they're going to be better than Florida, potentially even this year.
And that's fair. It's like, hey, baby steps. And so when Barrett says 3 years, then maybe he's right. Kirby's building quite the monster, and it's going to take a lot to upend that. So
Trent nailed it though. Until Tennessee has a quarterback set to go, it's not going to work. But that's for any team, right?
Yeah, very true.
You look at the teams, about that. You look at the teams that's beating Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, besides South Carolina last year, of course. But you look at those teams that beating those. You've had to have a playmaker at quarterback. You've had to have a difference maker at the quarterback position. And you look back at Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M and guys like that. Tennessee just doesn't have that right now. And maybe it's Harrison Bailey, but Harrison Bailey's not going to hurt you with his feet. He's going he's going to throw the ball around the yard. But Tennessee just needs that guy at quarterback to move on to that next level. And we were looking at recruiting rankings. Pruitt had a top 10 class last year, but he was 7th, but he was 5th in the SEC. That's a big thing. That's what Rick did when he was there. He was always finishing the top 10 classes, but he was 5th or 6th in the SEC. He was 700. Tennessee was 700 points behind Georgia. So I mean that's a big difference there. So there's still a gap. It may be closing, might not be closing, but there is still a gap there in talent.
And that's why I said, if something's going to happen to Georgia, it's going to have to. As long as Kirby Smart's in charge, I don't know that they're going to take that big a dip in recruiting. So, do want to give a big shout out to our friends at Athens Ford. They have the May specials up. Now that it's May 5th. They are still doing the 0% APR financing for 84 months on selected 2019 Ford models. That's with approved financing. Right now, our friends at Athens Ford have 85 different vehicles that qualify for that. So if you can't find out those 85, I don't know what to tell you. You're just too damn picky. But 0% APR financing for 84 months, 7 years of 0% financing. You can't beat that. And of course, if you want to get, say, the 2020 Ford F-150 or the 2020 Ford Explorer, the 2020 Ford F-150 is $17,000 off, or you can get 0% financing for 72 months, 6 years. So that should be pretty nice. And the 2020 Ford Explorer, I've seen one recently. They're beautiful. $10,000 off or finance at 0% APR for 72 months. And on top of all that, if you just go to the website, they'll give you $250 off a vehicle. And they have no payments for 120 days. So if you're like, hey, we need a vehicle, but right now money's tight, they have 3 months deferred, 3 months paid, 6 months on these new vehicle purchases that you can offers that you can take advantage of. That is on inventory of 866 different vehicles. You can get no payments for 120 days. So if anybody is trying to take care of the folks in Athens, it is our friends at Athens Ford. They are going above and beyond to make deals available, financing available to anybody who needs a new vehicle. And of course, if you buy a pre-owned vehicle or a used vehicle from them, it too will have a lifetime powertrain warranty, so long as it has under 80,000 miles on it, which I don't know if they have any more than that. You can't beat what they do at Athens Ford. So a big shout out to our friends over there. And also want to give a big shout out to our friends at Your Pie. That's what I had for dinner the other night before I left town. We, as a family, we met at my father-in-law's house. Of course, we had a picnic, and he stayed one side of his yard, we stayed the other, and my wife's sister-in-law came up. So very far social distance, but everyone brought food, and I took Your Pie over there for my wife and son, and it was fantastic. So shout out to the 70 different Your Pie locations. Ouch. And big shout out to the Drew and Natalie French who run that, and the great work that they've been doing feeding the communities, and that the contactless pickup is fantastic. You put in your order on the Your Pie app, you go outside and you pull up, they're out there with it. It's in the bag, it's perfectly clean, and it's best pizza you can get. So shout out to our friends at Your Pie. You want to hit us up with another question, Jake?
All right. Yeah. We got several today. This one kind of for everybody. I wanted to make sure that I get. I never know how to pronounce this guy's name. He's been around forever. Turisops.
I've actually met this gentleman numerous times when I go down and speak to the like a Jacksonville Bulldog Club or the Bulldog Club in Golden Isles. Yeah, he's driven up. Great guy. Been on the board since dial up. Since we put two bikes together. He has been a long and a member of graduate of Georgia, marine scientist, I believe. So,
well, how the hell do you say his name?
I don't know. I don't know how he says his handle. I know his real name.
Yeah,
I don't know how he says his handle.
Well,
but this guy, hey, I want to give a big shout out to, because he does a great job in the fish rodeos. They go in and they take those clownfish, that invasive species with the deadly spines on it, with the neurotoxins on them, that just devastate reefs and devastate the local fish population. They have these big, the clowns? No, lionfish, not clownfish. Lionfish. The lionfish. They have a big lionfish rodeo where they go and they try to remove them from the population. He goes into those things and spears those assholes. So, big shout out to Terce Yachts for doing the Lord's work.
And if you had fish rodeo as your keyword of the podcast, congratulations, you've won a prize.
Not clownfish. They're not killing Nemo. They're killing the evil lionfish.
Good question though. He says Georgia's been spoiled by having Rodrigo Blankenship as a kicker. Yes. Should we be worried about the freshman coming in and relying on him to help Georgia win games?
That's Alabama.
I think it comes down though too to is Jared Zirkle the guy this year? I think that you've got a real chance of seeing Camarda out there kicking field goals and punting. If I'm just kicking for accuracy. Now for distance, I don't know, maybe that I'd go with Camarda off the tee, but I think from 45 in, he's money.
I think the big fear is, talk about being spoiled. How many of those kickoffs were touchbacks? I mean, he went from the first year not being able to do it really. I mean, he had a lot of issues. And then what was it, 2-3 years, every kick, unless they told him not to. That you talk about being spoiled, never having to worry about a ball being returned on a kickoff. Took a lot of great returners out of the game. Now, granted, touchbacks have increased all over the place because of the new rules, but when those balls are sailing out the back of the end zone, it's not even an option for a guy to return it from 4 yards deep. I just think that is. I know how important field goals are and punting, but I think if we're really spoiled, it's like, hey, they're having to start. These teams are having to drive 75 yards every time against the number one defense in the nation, and I think that is a good system to have, and we can be very, very spoiled because of that.
That is a good system to have. I agree. I agree with your football genius there.
No, I'm just saying we talk about Kirby Smart playing the odds, right?
Sure.
He is a conservative coach. He's a conservative defensive coach, and he believes in system and he believes in odds. And he's like, look, if you can drive 75 yards against my defense and score 4 or 5 times a game, then hats off to you. You deserve to win. And he'll go into the locker room afterwards and, and meet the press. It's like, hey, they had a great football team. They had a great plan. They did what they were supposed to do. What he gets really pissed off about is like, we fumbled on our 15 or, we turned the ball over. That's why he's big on ball control, because he's like, look, if I don't give you the ball in a easy spot and I make you drive 75 yards every time you get it, then, or I punch you deep, you flip the field, and he wants a strong punter. It's like, if I make you drive the field every time, that is my system, and good luck beating it. And that's winning him football games left and right.
I think the short answer is that you always worry about your kickers and your punters, regardless yes. of the situation. But I think a piece of it with the field goal kicking, if the offense makes the strides that it needs to, the hope is that maybe the field goal kicking doesn't quite matter as much because you're not kicking as many field goals. It didn't seem like LSU needed their kicker that much last season. And that's obviously what you aspire to be, is an offense that no one can stop.
I agree. I think Zirkle can get in there and compete for the job and eventually be a good kicker. I mean, the kid can nail him pretty consistently, but freshman kickers make me nervous. And so, like I said, I think that you got to see what you got in Camarda. Maybe you see. I mean, is Buse still around or
Brooks? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I know he can bomb them too. So I mean, they've got options. And I'll tell you this: if I'm a field goal kicker, I am scared shitless to miss a kick with Scott Cochran being my positional coach.
I just see. Kid misses a kick or shanks a punt or fumbles a punt reception. Buffs a punt. And he's like, "Come to the sideline." Oh.
Yeah.
Nope.
Scott Cochran's
I've stayed out here in the middle of the field with witnesses. I'm not coming to the sideline.
Cochran's going to dislodge his jaw like a snake and just suck the kid down.
Meet me in the medical tent.
That's cold. Yeah. Nope. I'm not coming in. I'm not coming to the sideline. Throw the flag.
Another good question here from our guy Ronnie Brown. I like this one. He says, what do you guys think is the percentage of the team that was disciplined enough to keep in as close to playing shape as possible during the quarantine?
Oh, good one. Great question.
I'll tell you what, it'll be evident real fast. There's no question about that. But I trust most of these guys to do that. I would say I would give it probably 80% or better, to be honest with you.
I think your Nolan Smiths and your guys like that, Jermaine Johnson and those guys that are dedicated and kind of leaders on the defense and offense. I think you're gonna see those guys come in tip-top shape. I think some of the other guys you might see suffer. I worry about some backup offensive lineman or backup defensive lineman coming in a little bit overweight or out of shape. But I think your main guys, leadership-wise, will come in tip-top shape.
Yeah, your big boys are who you got to be concerned about.
Well, here's the thing.
At home eating sandwiches.
Yeah. I think I was on the Chuck Oliver show, and he's asking about some guys that came to Georgia, and you just didn't hear as much about them. After they got there, they came in. I don't say like all world, but very highly ranked. And he mentioned like Robert Beal and Kyrus Jackson, some guys like that. And I said, look, those guys have all the talent, but they've had injuries. Robert Beal was injured. Kyrus Jackson, that Vanderbilt game, broke a bone in his hand or something, sprained his hand. He was out for a long time. When you have Jermaine Johnson and Azeez Ojulari and Adam Anderson and guys like that, all fighting for that same spot, you're splitting hairs. The competition is so fierce. If you get sidelined by an injury, you're going up against, perfect example, Adam Anderson gets in on third down. He has a hard time getting out there on first and second down because there's other guys who are just a fraction of a hair better than he is on those downs. So even though he's the fastest outside linebacker Georgia has, Kirby Smart says as much in practice, the other guys are able to get off blocks better or do one thing better that gets them out there on first and second down, and the Nolans of the world out there doing their thing, it's tough. So if you want to play and you are stuck at home and that the other guys are out working because they put out a couple of videos. So if Nolan Smith is out there, the Kobe Dean's out working, that Trayvon Walker's out there working, and you want one of those jobs, better get your ass out there and do it, So in other words, the guys who had minor setbacks, who don't see the field because the competition is so fierce, now everyone's scattered back home. Now's your chance to, if you don't maintain, you'll never see the field under Kirby Smart. I mean, the competition is just too fierce.
I think too, you got to be worried about if you're one of those guys and you're coming back in here with Scott Sinclair, and now you got Scott Cochran, who knows a thing or two about strength and conditioning, and you show
and neither
back
one's
up,
as scary as Kirby.
And you show back up a little pudgy. It's going to be a tough run up to the season for you, I believe.
I do like how the UGA nutrition account just tweets all the food that the players are eating, and it's all like protein and greens. And I'm like, there's some Swedish fish in there somewhere. They're just not sending you, right?
I think one guy that suffered from that setback is Tyson Campbell, and the cornerback position is an interesting position coming in this year because you got three cornerbacks and then three nickel guys, slot guys that played for Kirby last year. So that'll be interesting to see how those guys come back and compete for that position. Also adding Keely Ringo to the mix. So that's 7 quality guys you got. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so that Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell, like, look, I got guys gunning for my job. Mark Webb's like, no, I got to beat out Devon Wilson, and Devon Wilson, I got to beat out Mark Webb. And Tariq Stevenson's like, y'all remember what I did last year? Hey, none of y'all are as fast as me, that star spot. So it's like perfect example. You bring up the quarterbacks. I was bringing up outside linebackers, offensive line, 3 spots available. maybe 4. I don't know that anything's locked down, even with Ben Cleveland coming back. These guys better be on their grades, and they better be on the treadmill. They better be doing what Scott Sinclair, when he puts up his little videos, saying, here's things you can do at home. It's not mandatory,
wink.
But it's mandatory.
especially guys like Justin Schaefer. This is your boomer bust year. So
absolutely.
I mean, so you got to think that Schaefer and those guys are doing their part to be ready for the season.
Absolutely. I've spoken to some people who know these kids, and I've gotten some reports about what they're doing to stay in shape. And there's some pretty inventive things going on. I don't want to get them in trouble, because we're not supposed to talk to anybody. We're not supposed to talk to parents. We're not supposed to talk to signees. We're not supposed to talk to signees' parents, apparently. I don't know why the hell that kind of rule's out there, but c'est la vie. We are not allowed to talk to as many people. We just still talk to them. We just don't publish what we do unless we have the war room.
Hey.
And we found, hey, shout out to Dave. One of the things that was in the war room was when the offensive line group had their position meeting, the boss, David Andrews from the Patriots, hopped into that Zoom meeting and talked to the guys, and they were all thrilled to hear from him, talking about his coming back and if you have 2-time Super Bowl winner David Andrews, who's like, hey, I was an undrafted free agent. You guys can get there too. There we go. There's a young lady. Hop in the show. Hey, give her the mic. We'll get better analysis. Say hello. Oh, anyway. Hey, I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors, the Buford-based family-owned Georgia garage door company. Our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors take great care of us. They not only sponsor this podcast, but they also sponsor our UGA Sports website. You too can be a member of UGAsports.com if you just want to use promo code UGA free 2020. You can read the War Room for free. It's you can read all of our stuff through July 1st. Trent does a great job breaking down stuff. He had a great story today, how many defensive linemen can Georgia take, and basically who those targets are. Jake has the most wanted. Was it Chaz Chambliss yesterday that was on there?
Yep, Chaz was.
You had a Marius Mims on there last week. Basically, here's a ton of recruits that Georgia wants, but here's the most wanted. Here's the top 5, top 10 guys you absolutely have to see. Thane, of course, with his Film Don't Lie and all the podcasts he does. Again, all the stuff that's behind the paywall, you can see for free by doing that. But we could not offer that deal without our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors sponsoring the site. If you go to the front page of the site, you see a little ad there. It says Aaron Overhead Doors, 10% off for UGA fans. You're like, what the hell's it? And sure enough, if you need your garage door fixed, you need a garage door installed, you need a motor installed, you need your car to be the little button on the top where you push it and it makes your garage door open without using the actual garage door opener. Some cars have a little built into it. All that stuff, our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors can set up for you. And not only is Ryan Lucia, the owner of it, trying to take care of everybody in that gigantic service area they do, he's trying to take care of other small business owners. And he was shouting them out on Twitter. He said, look, if you have a small business, let me know. I will get the word out. So that's, again, he does charity work. The employees there find people that need garage door work done. They bring it to the company and say, hey, we got this person's in a bad way. We're going to try to take care of them. And they do these repairs for free, around Christmas time. So big shout out to them, and big shout out to them for supporting UGAsports.com and allowing us to do stuff like the free deal where you can read through July 1st. So Ryan inspires me to try to do outreach, and I just want to give them a big shout out for what they do for the community. So our shout out to them. And speaking of taking care of the community, our friends at Academia Brewing Company are doing the same thing. Now, I might have brought a few Academia beers with me down here to Orange Beach. This is my aunt's condo. And if you're going to be on Orange Beach, the beach is open. The restaurant should be open by the end of the week. Bring some Academia Brewing Company beer with you. It's fantastic. They have good beer here in Alabama, but nothing quite like Academia. So big shout out to them for making that available. And if you notice, if you go to their Facebook page, they had this fantastic meal that was free for people in the industry, people in the service industry. They're like, look, come by, we're going to feed you for free. I mean, that's a $24 meal, eat anywhere. And they were feeding people in the service industry the people, the essential workers, the people who make our lives easier in this lockdown, the Friends of Academia Brewing Company, we're feeding them for free. So big shout out to them. And they're still putting out new beers all the time. So check out Academia Brewing Company on Facebook. That's where they put up a ton of updates and stuff. So check it with them and go get some good beer.
All right. A couple questions here. We'll wrap things up with some rapid fire. Keith UGA 1. Trent mentioned Keely Ringo a second ago. He wants to know about Keely Ringo. He says, any chance we see Keely Ringo get some looks on offense? His running back tape is impressive. Trent, what do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, his running back, it was impressive, but I don't see him on the offensive side of the ball. I see him solely on defense. I think you don't see many Kirby guys switch back and forth to offense defense. You've had a couple guys, but it's been permanent moves. So you don't see many of those guys that are playing two positions. I don't see Keely moving over to. I think he's going to be too valuable of a defensive player in his career, Jordan.
Yeah, you don't rent a Lamborghini when you need a bulldozer. So I can't see that happening. He's that kid's too special to put over on that side of the ball, in my opinion. Mamba Anderson with a good one here for everybody. Do we start the season on time versus UVA? Roddy, touch on that scoop that we got last week.
And we put out the story Friday afternoon because it took a while for us to get it confirmed through multiple sources, but I think it was Thursday, or maybe it's Friday morning. I don't remember. Long weekend. We found out that the UGA medical staff, the doctors and trainers, had a big conference call with some coaches and support staff, and they said, here is our plan if we can come back June 1st or July 1st. That's still up in the air. Everything, practices and in-person contact is all prohibited through May 31st. And, later on in the month, they'll decide whether or not you can come back June 1st or if that needs to be extended. But right now, everything's prohibited through May 31st. But if they're given the go-ahead to come back June 1st or July 1st or whenever, they want some different scenarios. One scenario that was discussed on that call that we've confirmed through Greg McGarity, when we told him, hey, look, we know about the call and here's what was said. And he basically confirmed that is a possibility, not what's going to happen, but a possibility, because they're coming up with scenarios, was to have all of the Georgia players sequestered in the Georgia Continuing Education Center, the hotel there on campus. The coaches would be there too. There would be no visitors allowed. There would be no press allowed. And they would start the equivalent of a spring-fall camp. Now, for people that don't know, that's what Georgia does in the fall. They bring the kids in a couple weeks for fall camp. They call it fall. And granted, it's usually like the first day of August. And they stay at the Georgia Center for Continuing Education because school hasn't started yet. So they have a couple weeks of just, morning meetings, morning practice or afternoon practice, lifts, more meetings, and it is a full fall camp. Then halfway through, fall camp ends and they go back to classes, or classes start, and they have a couple more weeks of preseason. So a lot of people think fall camp is the first day of practice in August through that Friday before the first game. Now the fall camp is a couple weeks there, but they didn't get a spring practice either, or spring camp. So this would be a combined spring camp / fall camp thing that they would have everyone sequestered without visitation, without extra people coming around, in order to mitigate any possible exposure, temperature checks at the doors and stuff like that, be able to check each guy each day to see where they're at. So they basically came up with a very interesting scenario in which they could mitigate any type of exposure and keep up with allow them to get back to practicing. So we found out about the call. We got some confirmation that it happened, and I think it's a neat plan. I personally don't think it's going to happen. And what I mean by that is, I just think the coaches are so used to bringing the football players back before the general population, i.e. fall camps. Hey, we want the new enrollees show up the last week of May, the first week of June. They go to summer school. They're here on campus. They do lifts, they do meetings and stuff like that. They do workouts on their own. And then you have that first day of fall camp where they all check into the Georgia Center. They check into the hotel, and they have a week where it's just nothing but football, or 2 weeks where it's nothing but football. and then the rest of the students come and they start classes. I just think with this scenario, I don't know that the USG, the University System of Georgia, is going to allow athletes to come back before they allow the student population. I think they're going to say, look, it has to be cleared for everybody before we let you come back. That's just my gut feeling. I'm not basing that on conversations with anyone. I just think from the PR standpoint of it, it's going to be like, look, and the coaches should be able to say, look, we're going to have, we got all these medical staff, all these medical trainers who will be watching these kids like hawks. These will be the safest kids in America. But I just think that they're going to say, look, you got to let all the students come back. And these are student athletes before you let the athletes come back.
I agree. But the question is, does the season start on time?
I'm saying the season start. Yes, that's my interpretation, because everything I've seen them do is to make sure that the whole point of this scoop and the point of this plan is to be prepared for the season to start on time. That's why they have hey, if we start June 1st here and under these limitations, here's what our plan is. If we start June 10th, here's what our plan is. If we start July 1st, here's what our plan is. All of that is designed so that they can kick off against Virginia in a prepared manner.
Other thoughts? Anybody else? Any other predictions?
No, Roddy nailed it. He's dead on. He's the
I just from a university standpoint, what's happening everywhere right now is because we don't know exactly what to plan for. Like Roddy said, there's just multiple plans being formulated so that when it comes time to enact it, they're at least prepared in some manner. I do think the season will go on as scheduled. I don't know what that looks like, though. You don't know what it looks like in terms of fans. You don't know what that looks like in terms of what players are having to do, where they're living or anything like that. But I can tell you this, if there is not a season, it's completely catastrophic to every single college town in America. And so I think if there's a way to healthily avoid that, it's going to happen because money does speak, as long as, people are being safe. And I think we're seeing that happening a little bit more as we get on through this. So yeah, Georgia versus Virginia, does it happen in Atlanta? I have no idea, but I think it's going to happen.
My prediction is I don't think they will start on time, but I do think that you'll get the season in this fall. I think that there are just going to be some logistics that need to be worked out when you get everybody back on campus and trying to figure out how to get all these people dealt with. Are you going to have tailgating? Are you going to have, there's just a million questions. And I think football, while it is such a big piece of this, is also it takes a back seat to, a student population of 40,000 people.
Yeah, but a student population that is not being ravaged by this thing.
Sure.
And the whole point of the shutdown was to not overwhelm the hospitals. The hospitals are not being overwhelmed. So unless you have a spike that's bigger than the initial spike, I just don't see it happening. It's like, look, you need to open the damn things up, because this is to Dane's point about the situation with missing football, how that be catastrophic. You look at Vanderbilt that had $17 million. They've blown through that. They're now operating at a deficit. Not a lot of schools already operated at a deficit with football around, So you take football away and the, $160 million that it brings in, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, how's this going to go? And again, to the community, there are a lot of businesses, and I don't want to destroy the confidence with which we've been given from some of these places, but there are a lot of businesses that do not make they don't make profit until football season gets here. That is their Black Friday, if you will, is that first football game in the fall. So their profits come from football season in Athens. So they operate at a loss most of the year until football season gets here. And that's how they stay in business. And if there's not those home games, those businesses will go under. So there's no way around it. So
I agree.
The incentives there, but you're right. You got to take care medically, but you're going to have to show that this thing is back to as deadly as it initially was. And again, it could be. I'm not. God, I'm not even a good reporter, much less a doctor. So I'm just saying. I'm just saying that I said months ago, or not months ago, weeks ago, when we put a note on the board, how adamantly these schools are about playing this year, and they said, look, we are not dealing with the population. Normally, like when the flu comes, it's like take care of the very young and take care of the very old. This is attacking people who are elderly, plus people have underlying conditions. A lot of the athletes and such, yes, you can point to one or two people that have been healthy that have gotten sick, but the numbers, just the student population is not a population that's in danger. Now they can spread it, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that I think a lot of people are going to be like, hey, these are people who need to go about their lives. These are the people that need to be out there doing stuff, So I think that, hey, maybe they don't play in front of fans, but I think they're going to play on time.
I have one request though, and that's if they don't play in front of fans, find a way to do it at Hurdy Field. Just like make North Campus a football field once again, and let's get back to the old days.
Is there enough room up there? You'd have to knock down some buildings now, wouldn't you?
I mean, it's SEC football, Roddy. Come on, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Hey, we need to get rid of this North Campus building, with the old college. No, new college. New college. They have to get rid of new college.
All right, another question here for Trent. If LJ Johnson and Donovan Edwards both want to commit to Georgia, do you think Georgia still takes Lavassier Carroll as an athlete or a safety if he still wants to be part of the class?
I mean, that's a tough one because I don't want to get into who they're going to.
I'm glad I don't have to answer that one.
I don't want to get into they're going to drop this kid or that kid, but I think it's just one of those situations that let's see if it happens. Let's see what they could do. I mean, the possibility of that happening is very slim. We talked about it last year with landing 2 5-star tight ends. Majority of the time that you're not going to come across a situation where you're in that situation down the stretch. But I think that'll be one thing that Georgia, I mean, they in the past, I mean, they haven't been afraid to drop kids. That's one thing whether or not they say they drop kids or not, they haven't been afraid to tell them to look elsewhere. So I would expect Carroll in this class as of today, but if you got to a situation where you had LJ Johnson and Edwards wanting to come to Georgia, then yeah, I think there's no way you turn them down. You find a way to make it work. There is a possibility that you move Carroll to safety, or he is an athlete. He can play multiple positions, and that would be a situation that could happen. But there's no way you turn those two guys down. If both of them want to come, you bring them in.
Fair enough. I understand that. I tend to think that they're going to ride with just one of those guys, and I think I could see them playing them against each other. To be honest with you, I think that would actually be a very smart play. Who wants in first? I do still think that Donovan Edwards is the primary target.
You can't tell them they're both number one on the board, or they've had that situation in the past. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, you go in and you show them, side by side, and then you have one. You have both names on the line one. Then there's no line two, and then line three, you have somebody else's name. So look, whoever commits first is our guy. Like you said, play them off each other. First come, first serve. So
we've seen it before, and we'll see it again. I promise.
Well, no, it's the right way to do it.
All right, I think that's it for over here. We got anything on YouTube?
Yeah, we got one on the chat from Willie Jr. Does Kirby Smart play as many freshmen this year despite the pandemic?
No, I don't think so. I mostly because I think you've got such an experienced group of guys that he has hand selected up front who have the experience. You're gonna need some guys that you can trust right out of the gate. As soon as things get started, you're not going to have a lot of time to develop leadership or something like that.
Good point.
I think right away you're looking at less freshmen personally.
I don't think you're in the situation now under Kirby Smart that you have to rely on a freshman to come in and play. You're not going to have a freshman play defensive back. I mean, Keely Ringo might, get some minutes, but the defensive back's loaded. Linebacker, is stout. They have a lot of returners. Defensive line, they have a lot of returners. The one spot where I think you're going to see some freshman play is wide receiver, and of course maybe kicker. But I think you'll see some wide receivers come in and play as freshmen. But I think that might be and tight end Darnell Washington. But I don't think on the defense side of the ball you're going to see many freshmen.
You could probably see maybe you might see like a Broderick Jones get out there, Tate Radledge. But again, it's tough to come in and play as a true freshman. You would ideally love to have had those guys show up that last week of May, first week of June to get all that meeting time, all those walkthroughs with the other players, all those camps. You'd love to have had Jamie Newman here working with those freshman wide receivers, like Trent's talking about. But if they don't all get to show up until July 1st or August 1st, I think you nailed it, Jake. You're looking for those guys who've known quantities, who can produce at this level already.
And I wonder if they're working with these guys. I mean, like you see Jamie Newman's out working, and I know a lot of these guys go to Terrence Edwards for to work, and Jamie Newman's in Atlanta area all the time working. So I'm wondering if there has been some sessions where they've got in with some wide receivers already.
I would not surprise me if Justin Robinson's over there catching passes.
No doubt.
Well, we had mentioned earlier the kind of the off-season training. That's going to hit freshmen the hardest because they haven't gone at UGA. They don't know what that expectation is in person. And yeah, you can get a list, you can get a video. It's not the same thing as going through spring ball or going through fall camp for the first time. One more question for you, Roddy. Chip Crook asks, is Roddy losing weight or is it the lighting?
That's the lighting. Absolutely the lighting. Oh, and black. It's slimming. Just
wait till he puts his beach outfit on.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're going to look out the window.
Yeah.
That's just cruel.
There's a little lake out there. It's really nice, full of fish. So y'all should come rent this place. It's my aunt's place, and we have no rentals for June and July. So, which normally it's absolutely slap full. So,
I half expected you to do the show with a big sign behind you with the VRBO link.
I did put the VRBO link in the comments on YouTube. So, just want to know where it is. But no.
Next thing you know, he's going to ask me to be the producer for his HGTV Beach House show.
No, I came down because my son's still in school. So we figured he's sitting across the table from me right now doing his schoolwork. I'll spend the morning buying a printer and installing it so he can print out his stuff. But no, I have lost weight, and I appreciate him noticing. That makes me want to keep it up. But now that I'm here, they have margaritas by the gallon at some of these places, and I saw one place had a bucket of mudslides. I'm like, okay.
And so the boy's old enough to drive you around.
He's old enough to drive me around. Yes. He just speaking of, shout out to Ollie. He just got his license last Friday. So
sweet, very nice.
So he's got his license. So now he can go pick up his drunk dad from all over the big place down here in Orange Beach. So
live date, baby.
Hey, everybody! I appreciate everyone tuning in this week. I know it's not as much news from the team standpoint as we'd love to have, but we did have some great recruiting stuff, and your questions make the show go. So thank you for submitting your questions. Be sure to get them in next Tuesday. We will be back with more stuff to talk about then. Hopefully, some more positives on the on the team front. We always want positives on the recruiting front, but our guys bring you news about that stuff all the time. But hopefully we'll have some more positive stuff. There's a great dashboard article on the front of some of the stuff that Anthony Dasher's been hearing, spoken of, some of his conversations he's had. So be sure to check out UGAsports.com for tons of information. And we will talk to everyone next Tuesday at noon.